Hi, Jim Jordan here with the Citizens Legal Education, giving you an update. I'm in Oregon, November 22nd, 2020. It's been a few weeks after the election, and there's still, of course, no concession from President Trump. Many people think it's good he doesn't concede. Others are upset that he doesn't concede. But that's not the topic for today. That's sort of the background of what's going on. For me, I'm concerned with our governor in Oregon has basically said we have new lockdowns for temporary, of course, for restaurants and gyms and some restrictions for how many people you can have in your home, asking for law enforcement to get involved, and law enforcement is saying, no, thank you. That doesn't seem to work for us as a rule. So the question I want to talk about is very fundamental that applies to our situation now and also situations in the future when governors and governments take actions that are violations of basic fundamental rights. So the question is this, is where do our rights come from? Do they come from the government? Do we have constitutional rights as such that the government can actually restrict given certain circumstances? So that's the general assumption. As when I learned in law school, when I studied when I was in law school, and was that basically, yes, the government determines, the Supreme Court determines what's constitutional. Ultimately, the government has all these powers, and the citizens basically we have the Bill of Rights protecting our basic rights, and the courts will decide what is that correct balance. That's one view. That's the view that I had for many years, and many people still have. Now, I'm thinking now, these days, I'm going a little deeper into the teachings of the Founding Fathers prior to the Revolution and seeing where they drew the philosophical background for the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, where did that come from? And where are our rights coming from? So according to Jefferson and Madison and the other founders, basically our rights come from nature or God. They use those terms kind of, they meant the same thing. They're natural law, natural rights. They're basically self-evident. They're things that you can see when you think rationally. Do you have a right to your life? To live? Yes. Do you have a right to property? Yes, because without the right to property, you have no right to life. Do you have a right to pursue your dreams in life? Yes. Otherwise, there's no purpose to life. So that limitation comes when you basically violate the rights of another person. That's limitations. That's natural. That's obvious. That you don't need to be a lawyer to understand that. In fact, it's hard to understand if you are a lawyer, perhaps, because you're so confused by what you've studied, but certainly I was. So basically, there's some basic fundamental things that if you just reflect deeply, do you have a right to care for your own health? Make choices for yourself. What is right for you, as opposed to somebody else outside of you telling what's right for you? Yes. Now, if you are carrying a disease and you're spreading it around to other people, that's an assault. That's a violation of their rights. And if that's proven, you can't do that. You can be prosecuted for a crime, actually, if you're doing that intentionally, or you can be, quarantined if that's proven. We don't have any of that going on right now. We have no proof of any of these restaurants or any of these gyms spreading any infection. We have no proof of spreading infection by having 10 people in your home having dinner together. There's no proof. There's no evidence of that at all. Nothing. So where is that power coming from? It's coming from the government just basically saying, in our case, the governor saying, I have that power because I've declared a state of emergency because there's a pandemic. But does she actually have the authority to do that? I say no. She has no authority to do that. I have not abdicated my natural rights to freedom to breathe air without a mask over my face, or to have 20 people in my home if I want to, or to go to a gym or go to a restaurant. And the restaurant owners haven't given up the right to their life and their property. No. She has no right to declare that without actual factual evidence, scientific evidence, proving that location and those actions engaged in that location are a vector for infection. No authority to do that. She can't make up the right of an emergency. She has to prove it. And it has not been proven. And there's cases going around. There's a case in Ohio in federal court now basically saying There never was a state of emergency by any rational definition of emergency. Something excessive beyond the normal infection. All the evidence, all the epidemiological evidence point to that there was never an epidemic or a pandemic. There never was. There was redefining things. If you get hit by a car and you die and you have some strands of DNA in you that are labeled COVID-19, being called COVID-19, that's not the same as COVID-19 killing you. So there's a bunch of nonsense going on. I'm talking to people now who get that. There's some people that don't get that, and this video is not to persuade those people. This video is for those people who understand that and yet are still complying with illegal orders. They're illegal. And if they're illegal, not only do you not have to obey them, you have a duty to not obey them. Or we're going to live in a country that has no freedom anymore. So it's a time to take a stand. I'm in communication with a lot of people, including professional people, my dentist and other people that say, yeah, this is not right. They don't agree with what's going on. There's business owners all around town that don't agree with this, but they're doing it to avoid being fined. They're doing it under threat of force by the government to take their property, fining them, if they don't comply with a law that's illegal, that there's no authority to pass or to execute, to declare as an executive order. So these are all violations of your natural rights to life, property, and liberty. So the question is what are we going to do about it? Are we going to continue to behave as subjects did prior to the revolution, the American Revolution, where the king has final authority or parliament has final authority even though we have no representation? Are we going to comply with things that we know are wrong? When a law is passed that has no rational basis, it is no law at all. Anything against reason is unlawful. If it's against reason, if there's no reason to support it, it's not law. It doesn't matter if the governor says it's law. It doesn't matter if the United States Supreme Court says it's law. It's not law if it's not reasonable. And who decides that? You decide it. I decide it. This is our country. We, the people, are the creators of the government. They work for us. If they misbehave or they do not follow the law or they do things that are irrational, it is our responsibility to chain them to the government. Chain them to the Constitution, Chain the government to the Constitution. That's our job. That's our responsibility in a constitutional republic. So I'm speaking to those people that deep in their heart know this is true, but they have not quite got up the courage. I don't have a restaurant. I don't have a gym. I work out of my home. I'm not directly affected in my business because of this. And I think it's time that we start to act, not speak up. Speaking up has been done, but act. It's going to take multiple acts of courage to prevent the wave of oppression that will come the more we concede our natural rights. Government knows nothing other than power. That's why our system was set up the way it is, with the separation of powers. Separate branches of government controlling and checking the other. If we no longer have separation of powers, if we have the executive branch basically passing law and executing law, and the courts enforcing illegal laws that have no basis in reason, then we have no legitimate government. And then it's basically our power, it's our right, our fundamental collective right, as declared in the Declaration of Independence, to basically abolish that form of government and reestablish a form of government that respects our rights, to paraphrase the Declaration of Independence. So the question is when will you be ready to take a stand? And everyone has their own timing. Maybe it takes some more stuff. Maybe it's a mandate in Denmark. Did you hear? The Danish government was prepared to pass a mandate for vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines, for certain categories of people. And for 9 days, the people of Denmark rose up in opposition, not covered by the mainstream media, not a peep. And guess what? The Danish government backed down. We are not going to mandate a vaccine. The people will not accept it. Only if we accept these chains will we be wearing these chains. Without acceptance, without compliance, there is no authoritarian government. It cannot exist without your acceptance. There are not enough enforcers, and the enforcers are actually people too. They're citizens too. So from my perspective, we must reestablish the correct hierarchy in our system. And the hierarchy is, number one, nature, natural law. God, if you're religious; nature, if you're whatever, a naturalist. The natural order of things is God and nature. It is premium, is the primary essence, is the source of everything. The human being then comes with other life forms, of course. We create governments. Governments then charter corporations. All those are downstream from the primary source, which is God and nature, and then human beings. So we reestablish that hierarchy with the human being in this dimension as the ultimate authority, as a sovereign. We will have an experience of life, I believe, that will reflect the principles declared in the Declaration of Independence, where we have a country that lives up to its promise: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A country that respects the consent of the governed, that the people are the sovereign, and the government is our servant. Until then, we're going to live in more and more restrictions, more and more ridiculous violations of basic fundamental rights, more and more children being masked to go to school, traumatizing them, more and more elderly people being in homes dying alone without having access to see their families, more and more injustice, more and more division, more and more lies being perpetrated by complicit media, and not the world that I envision, not the world that we really have the right to experience. So my name is Jim Jordan. I'm speaking to you from not a perspective of even law, but as a human being, and what I believe my understanding to be of the foundational principles of our country, which to me is still the greatest country in the world. And it's the one refuge for freedom and liberty left on the planet. And it is up to us, every American citizen, to make their determination at what point and what will they do to stand to these principles. And deep in your heart, you know this is true. Many of my friends, I think, are just too afraid to recognize that they know it's up to them. It's not up to the president. It's not up to the Congress. It's not up to some special person online that's teaching something. It's up to each one of us to take a stand. And there will always be a consequence for taking stands against authority. And as Jefferson said, you have no rights. You have no constitutional rights. You have no rights that you are not willing to fight and die for. Otherwise, they're just promises. Your rights are claimed by you and you're ready to stand for them. And it takes courage. And now is the time to be courageous and drop all the virtue signaling and other superficial presentations of caring about society. We know deep down this is wrong. So stand up, open your restaurants, open your gyms, open your hair salons. Police refuse to enforce illegal laws. Sheriffs refuse to enforce it. Citizens, take off your masks. If you want to wear a mask yourself if you think of protection. Those that don't, don't. If the mask works and you're wearing a mask, you're protected. There is no pandemic. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. That's a cold, hard fact. There is no pandemic. You've been brainwashed. This is Jim Jordan with the Citizens Legal Education, wishing you a great day.